Hello, I'm here with Sara Osorio from Printing United Alliance. How are you doing, Sarah? Nice to
Hi,
see you.
Jack. Doing well. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Excited to have this conversation today.
Excellent. We're going to be talking about the subject of carbon black, but maybe if you could start, if you could just introduce yourself and your role at the Alliance.
Sure. So, my name is Sara Osorio. I'm the Environmental Health and Affairs Coordinator for Printing United Alliance. We do a variety of things for our members. I would say 50% of our work is working with members and assisting them with any kinds of questions they might have, not just on sustainability, but also general EPA environmental compliance. We also cover OSHA, so occupational health and safety. And then what we're going to talk about today more on the sustainability side. And then the other part of what we do is advocacy. So we represent the industry and we advocate for the industry at the federal, state, and in some cases local level, to make sure that any legislation, any regulation passed is not going to be burdensome on the industry and really trying to advocate for print.
Yeah, excellent. So, I mean, sustainability is almost a bit of a calling for some. Is this something that's always sort of been important to you, even outside of work?
Absolutely. So, sustainability and environmental work is absolutely my calling. My undergraduate was in environmental studies. I recently finished a master's degree in sustainable management. It is what I love. It is what I live and breathe, and it is something that I am passionate about. And it doesn't end when my workday ends. I carry sustainability throughout every decision that I make in my life.
Fantastic. You're perfectly qualified for this discussion then. Okay, we are specifically going to talk about carbon black. Could you explain exactly what that is and why the printing industry is so heavily dependent on it?
Sure. So carbon black is the primary pigment used in black printing ink, but it doesn't just end at black printing ink. It is also used as an extender or, a pigment in many other inks. Carbon black is very important to printing because of the qualities that the pigment carries. It's very hard to find comparable substitutions just because of the fastness, the clarity, the vibrancy, the color of carbon black. And yeah, it's just very important to all pretty much all ink systems within print.
Okay, so it's anything, so the print on books, in newspapers, in packaging, anything that's black is will have carbon black as its sort of at its root.
Yeah.
What are the issues with carbon black?
Yeah, so this issue kind of popped up for us here in the US right around the time when I started at the Alliance about 2.5 years ago. And what we are seeing is at the state level, um, as you may or may not know, our EPR system is quite fragmented. It's being passed at a state level, so there's a lot of discrepancy. And what we have noticed is that certain states are introducing EPR legislation, extended producer responsibility legislation, and hacking into that legislation, they're adding a ban on toxic chemicals. However, it's not just a part of a DPR legislation. We have seen other states like New Jersey introduce a standalone ban on toxics, and they are including carbon black as a chemical, but carbon black is in fact not toxic. Carbon black, when encapsulated into a matrix, so a printing ink, a very common area where we also see carbon black is tires. So the reason why tires are black is because they use carbon black. When carbon black is incorporated into a matrix like tires, like rubber, like printing inks, it is no longer toxic. And the real toxicity from carbon black is not because the molecule is toxic, but when it's inhaled, it can affect the lungs. So if you're using proper PPE with the powder, it's not going to be an issue. If it's encapsulated in a matrix, it's not going to be an issue. So it is not toxic. This has been reiterated by several government agencies. So the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, OSHA, has said carbon black is not toxic. IARC, which is the International Association for Research on Cancer, has said carbon black when incorporated in matrix, not toxic. Same thing as OEHA in California. They run the Prop 65 program. They have said when incorporated into a matrix, not toxic. So banning it as a toxic chemical makes no real sense. Um, but another issue that we have sort of inferred that is the reason for banning carbon black is that black plastic is very hard to recycle. not because it's not recyclable, but because it is not detected by the infrared radiation, the machinery that they sort plastic with. The black plastic gets confused with the conveyor belt. So black plastic is hard to recycle. It's not that it's not recyclable, it's just hard to sort. So we have sort of inferred that one of the reasons why they want to ban carbon black is because they want to remove black plastic from recycling systems in order to avoid this. But through our research, we have also discovered that there have been many, many advances in recycling technology that now sort carbon black very easily, just like many other plastics. So the issue with black plastic and with carbon black right now isn't really that black plastic is not recyclable, isn't really that it's toxic. It's that our recycling infrastructure in the US is very, very outdated. So it doesn't have the capacity to pull black plastic out.
Okay. I mean, there's always a simpler story behind the initial story, isn't there? Perhaps you can explain then what Printing United Alliance's role is with this issue. How are you supporting your members?
A big part of what we do is advocating for the industry. So when we see these bans on toxic materials, including carbon black, pop up, we immediately jump into action. In New York, a couple years ago, we launched a pretty heavy advocacy program in New York. We submitted letters. We launched an action alert that urged members in New York to go to our website, fill out our action alert, and that would email their respective members. And we actually had a huge win in New York. So we actually got carbon black removed entirely from the legislation. In New Jersey, very similarly, launched a whole campaign, had our members send in letters, and we did not get carbon black removed, but we did get a specific exemption for printing inks. So, really launching these campaigns involving our members. We set up the letter themselves. So all they have to do is go to our website, fill in, their information, their address. It immediately finds their respective representative and they can reach out to their representatives and say, hey, like this is really going to affect our business. This is going to have a really big negative effect on printing. So just always trying to be the voice for printing when we see things like this.
Yeah, so you're almost taking it on a state by state basis to,
Yes. So
yeah.
that's the thing here in the US. Things at the federal level move very, very slowly, and the states sort of feel like they have to get things moving in these areas. So for a lot of these EPR and environmental issues, we very much fight a state to state battle.
Okay. It sounds like there is a solution that you're working towards, but it's potentially expensive and complicated, but it can be done. But what are the sort of alternatives to carbon black and the pros and cons of them?
Yeah, so something very interesting that we saw when this whole carbon black issue started to emerge is that one of the alternatives being pushed was an algae based black pigment. But as it turns out, this is also carbon black. It's derived differently. So the traditional carbon black that we're talking about is fossil fuel derived. This alternative maybe is lower in emissions, so it could be more environmentally friendly, but at this point, it's not necessarily scalable to cover the entire printing industry. There are also other black pigments out there, but they just don't have the same qualities and I guess reliability, I would say, that carbon black has for black printing ink.
Okay. So you're really saying that carbon black is kind of worth fighting for.
Absolutely. We
Yeah.
absolutely think carbon black is worth fighting for, because like I mentioned, there really isn't a reason to ban carbon black. It's not toxic. It is detectable by new sorting technology. So there's really no need to go through all of these processes to change a pigment for pigments that we already know aren't going to have the same qualities.
Okay. So what's your sort of prediction of how things will develop from here and how your members really need to sort of navigate the process of what each state is going to legislate on?
Yeah, so we are really hoping that members to, stay connected, pay attention to what we're doing, especially if you're in one of those states that we've seen a lot of movement towards this. So New York, New Jersey, Vermont. These are the
Mm.
states that we've sort of seen these legislations pop up, and be ready to submit the action or respond to the action alerts, submit the letters. Um, we are hoping for some sort of harmonization with an EPR that will not include these toxics in packaging bans, but harmonization does seem far away for us right now. There are talks of a national EPR. We don't know what that would look like. Our position on EPR is very dependent on, does it include paper? Does it include carbon black? We want to make sure that we update our recycling systems, that there are things in place to better our recycling in the US, but it does have to come with a certain level of caution to not affect printing, especially because printing is made up of small businesses, and sometimes some of these regulations can be very onerous.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I just wondered, obviously I'm over here in Europe, you're in the US, and we're talking about the issue as it is over there. But we have a similar situation here. My understanding is that the packaging and packaging waste regulation authorities are putting some things in place that I believe the recycling element you talked about needs to be ready by 2030. How does what's happening over here, somewhere like Europe, where there are regulations, how does that affect what's going on there in the US?
Well, we definitely have members that do work in the EU, so we do try to pay some close attention to what is happening, but
Mm.
also because the trend seems to be things happen in the EU, then they jump to California, New York, Minnesota, Washington, Colorado, and then once some more of the blue states start passing these laws, then it kind of goes to a federal level. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. We have the PPWR in the EU being implemented right now, and then we have EPR happening in the US at that state level. And now that we have so many states and we have calls for harmonization because these structures are so different, covered materials are so different. Some states cover business to business, other states don't cover business to business. So we're kind of seeing that trend play out right now in real time where, it happened in Europe. Now we have states doing it. And now we have calls for something more harmonized at the national level because it is getting complicated for producers to comply with everything at the same time.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much for helping us navigate through what is clearly a fairly thorny issue, but one that you're working hard towards for your members, both in America and across the world. So thank you so much for your time on that. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jack.